Hey guys, welcome to another episode. By the way, this is our fifth season. This is the beginning, actually, of the fifth season. Because we ended the last season with great interviews, and as you guys know, we always bring you the best interviews from the people in our area that's knowledgeable. So today we have Dr. Michael C.R. Nabors with us, and Dr. Michael is actually my pastor. I want to say it up front so folks know. And he's the president of the NAACP Evanston North Shore branch. Now today's a special about Black History Month, because, and not only about Black history, about Black people, because Pastor Nabors, I'm gonna refer to you as Dr. Nabors, because is very knowledgeable, and I think he's fascinating. So you guys are gonna want to hear what he got to say. Now, normally people know I don't give people my guests questions, because I want to be authentic. I want you to come right off the top. I want them to know that this is a very authentic interview. So, I looked up the mission of the NAACP.
Yes.
And and to be honest, I never realized the impact that it had. And I actually read said the mission of the NAACP is the mission of the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People, NAACP, and I underline it's security political. I underline political, educational, social, and economic quality of the rights, and to eliminate the race-based discrimination, and to ensure the health and wealth and being of all people. So I kind of looked at them like, you hear about NAACP, but you don't really, you know it, but you don't realize the impact that it has, right? Mm-hmm. And I had to sit back and I'm like, wow, I never, let me say, inhale that, okay, right? Mm-hmm. So we'll talk about that.
Okay.
But my first question is, tell me about Michael Nabors, okay, from as a black man, and tell me about his experience. Sure. Because I think, as I hear you speak many times, I think you're fascinated, but I want to know you, so that folks may know as we go along, they know where you came from.
Okay. All right. Well, Leroy, thank you for that. I appreciate that, and I appreciate the fact that you've done the research on the NAACP as well. So I'll give a bit of my background, but also connect it to the NAACP, which is really, I think, very interesting, because it is an organization that has helped to shape me and to mold me from the time I was 12 years old, when I first became a member of a branch in Kalamazoo, Michigan. So I grew up in a family, a relatively large family of 9 children born to my parents. I'm the youngest of 9, and it was a typical African-American family growing up in a small Midwestern town. My dad was an assembly line worker, and my mom was a homemaker. And so we grew up in a tiny 3-bedroom house, probably no more than 600 square feet. I don't know how all of us survived all of that, but we did. And I have 6 older sisters and 2 older brothers who also really shaped me and molded me. So growing up in a sort of cocoon of an African-American family in the 1960s, and the 1970s was a great joy. So I was growing up at a time when everything was happening in this nation that was creating growth and development, and also challenges for people of color. So my first memory that I can recall was when I was just about 4 years old, when my mother began to sort of scream. She was watching television. All of my sisters and brothers were in school, and I was the only one home. And she started screaming, and something came on the television. I started crying because she was screaming. And later I learned that she was watching the news report that announced the assassination of John F. Kennedy. And so that was in 1963. So I was just about to turn 4 when that happened, and that was an incredible memory that really stuck with me. And then 2 years later, I remember one of my older brothers who came home from high school, who was very discouraged and very angry and mad, and that sort of attitude came into the whole household. And when we asked what the problem was, he said Malcolm X had just been assassinated in Harlem. And so before I turned 10 years old, I was 9 years old, when two other incidents happened in 1968 that sort of shaped my personality, and one of them was the assassination of Bobby Kennedy, and the other one was the assassination, of course, of Martin Luther King Jr. So by the time I was 10 years old, all of the folks that my mother had on the wall, pictures, John F. Kennedy, Bobby Kennedy, Martin Luther King Jr. She didn't have a picture of Malcolm X on the wall, but all of those heroes of mine had been killed because they were advocates for social justice. So that part of me sort of began to develop and to grow, and I saw that there was a need for that kind of attention to be brought to Black people in order to garner civil rights on their behalf. And I joined the NAACP because it was real big in our small community. I think somebody in our church decided they would buy memberships for all the young people in the church. And that's how I became a member. And you may know, Leroy, after that, by the time I became an adult, I became president of the Princeton NAACP when I was a 25-year-old pastor. I became president of a much larger branch, the Trenton branch of the NAACP.
I saw that.
Yeah, both in New Jersey. I was probably about 33 or 34 at that time. And then in Detroit, I was a member of the board for the NAACP. They have 10,000 members in Detroit, the largest in the country. And so it just seemed like a natural fit when I arrived here.
No, I saw that because, and for those of you who want to Google that, I do have your entire bio. I mean, I pulled it up because I wanted to know. And so, and I didn't want to go through all that. I just want to kind of, for those of you who listen, if you want to Google Dr. Nabors, just go ahead and Google him. You'll see his exact bios. So you answered sort of what I was going to ask next. What triggered you to become an activist?
Yes.
What that so we're saying that from what you're saying is the with your mom and your brother and all that stuff, and at 10 years old you had that, you had that thing like, hey, maybe I got to do something. Was that the trigger that said I got to do something?
I think as much as a 10-year-old can think about doing something that might change the world, I certainly didn't think, hey, I'm going to change the world, but I think that it left an impression on me.
Right, that's what I'm saying. Yeah.
And the impression that it left on me made me think as I grew older, what am I going to do with my life? How am I going to dedicate myself to these causes where so many honorable people were killed? And so by the time that I got to high school, and then by the time that I got to college, I was narrowing my focus. So my focus was, initially I wanted to be a lawyer, but if I was a lawyer, I was going to be a lawyer specializing in civil rights, trying to follow after Thurgood Marshall. And then I decided, well, maybe I want to go into business, and then that wasn't particularly of great interest to me. And then I felt this enormous sense of calling at the church that I was serving. They really were filled with young people. They were very encouraging to young people. And Leroy, I started memorizing poetry and being invited to speak at morning worship services, and that was it. Whenever you're in a Black Baptist church and you're young and you do that, people will always say, that boy's going to be a preacher, that girl's going to be a preacher. So, yeah.
So those were the things that shaped you to become who you are today.
Absolutely.
All right.
Yes.
So when you look at all that had happened since, because of course when we were younger, we didn't have Black History Month. What has that, when that came into place, what has that taught you, or how did you feel about that? Was that something that you're like, wow, we are arriving, or what was that for you specifically?
Well, I will say for me, I remember the first time that our school celebrated Black History Month. I was in junior high, and back then that was ninth grade. Ninth grade didn't start in high school at that time, but I was in ninth grade. And Mr. George Monroe was the principal of the school. And he came to me and he said, Michael, I understand that you write poetry and that you love to speak. I'd like you to be a guest speaker at our first Black History program at South Junior High School. So I was
in
really
Michigan?
Is it in Michigan?
Michigan,
yeah,
right, cool.
in Michigan. And so I said I was really nervous, and I'd never spoken in front of a school. Your peers are sometimes merciless, when you try to get up and say something. So, but I agreed to do it. And I never will forget the little simple poem that I recited. I can't remember who the author was, but it sort of spoke about the ethos of what I was experiencing as a kid with regard to Black History Month. And it went like this: I am big, I am strong, I do not do what I do wrong. Only one thing I do lack, I am not white, but I am Black. I may ask but never plead, just release me, set me free. I work the fields, I break my back, I work hard because I'm Black. Because I'm Black, you bear me shame. Because I'm Black, I get the blame. Because I'm Black, you frown on me. Because I'm Black, I am not free. And so when I said that, at 14 years old or whatever, my peers really, they stood up and clapped, and that made my day. I was just absolutely ecstatic, And I don't know why I remember that these 50 years later, but that was the moment. Yeah.
But that really, so Black history meant something to you.
It did.
It meant. Is there a word you can say it meant what? Is there a word that you can explain that?
I would use the word empowerment.
Okay.
When I began to learn about characters and incidents and events in Black history, I began to recognize what I was not learning in my regular history classes in school, and that somehow our history had been hidden or swept under the rug, and all of that glory and all of that amazing stuff from folks that contributed so greatly had been denied us.
It has. Yeah, totally. Just as a tangent to today, what's your thoughts on what's happening in Florida, and the governor not wanting to teach AP Black history?
It is disgraceful. It is disgraceful. And the NAACP was one of the first organizations to file a lawsuit against Governor DeSantis for moving in that direction. But now I understand there are a host of lawsuits against him, including about 50 students who are African American.
Yeah.
And so what it is it is a governor and a movement that appears focused on trying to deny marginal people the right to know their history. So if you're going to deny an opportunity for Black children to learn about Black history, you'll also deny indigenous students to learn about Native American history. You'll deny Chinese Americans to learn about Chinese American history, all of that. And so we thought that was very, very important for the NAACP to get involved in that. And I'm glad that the opposite is happening in the state of Illinois and here in Evanston.
So when I think about that, I'm like, well, we know he may be running for politics, and we don't want to get into that, but I just think about, would Black people support that? I don't think so, but I'm not going to address that. But when I think about that, I'm like, wow, you really gonna want to do that. Mm-hmm. So I want to go back to your poetry, and of course, I've heard you many times recite the Martin Luther King. So my question is, you remember that because you wanted to? It made an effect on you, or what does that mean to you to say when you recite Dr. Martin Luther King speech? Is it one or two or three things, or is the entire poetry that actually lets you why you do that?
Yeah. Well, Leroy, I would say that my passion for doing that comes from a really strong conviction of believing what Dr. King was saying, believing that God had touched and anointed this man in such a way that his message wasn't just for his own time period. It wasn't just for the audience that he was sharing that message with all the way back in the 1950s and 60s. So when I think about the brilliance of the message, and the bottom line of the message is that he was a Christian who understood the need to make the world a better place through the lenses of the gospel of Jesus. And so for me, starting out very early in the church, becoming a minister very early, it resonated with me that somehow he was able to create an intersection between the work of the church and also the work that needed to be done in the community. He didn't just confine himself between or within the four walls of the church. His greatest work was probably done out in the community, carrying a message in the church outside into the community.
But do you, okay, so as I looked at that speech, do you think there's something today that we as black people are missing? Or do you think that from that particular speech, do you think we're missing something? Or what do you take from that speech that you can say, you know, Dr. King says, and then we're not grasping that?
Wow. Yeah, Leroy, that's a great question. And as I think about that and respond to it, I would say that generally, Dr. King was really guided by the ethic of love. So everything that prompted him to be involved in the civil rights movement, everything that made him focus on trying to make the nation a better place in the world was based on his understanding of God's love and our responsibility to love one another. So when I think about what we're missing today, I think we're missing that. I think we have shifted from that focus on love, which was also nonviolent for him.
Mm-hmm.
It was
Absolutely.
a love ethic that was nonviolent. I think in this day and age, and especially with the younger generation, we've made a shift from that. And we are, if folks are coming at us, then we're going to come at them. If folks are angry at us, we're going to be angry at them. If folks are seeking to do us harm, we are going to pick something up to defend ourselves. And in Dr. King's day, that was not the case. So that there's something missing today from what we're doing to try to make the world a better place in comparison to what Dr. King was trying to do 50 and 60 years ago.
All right, so I'm going to shift to your travels because you speak all over the country. So I was thinking, is there I'm going to say this to our Caucasian folks. When you travel and you speak with them, different churches, different organizations, is there an underlying thread? Is there something that you see is constant? When you try to educate them about what we're doing in Evanston and what's going on, what's that underlying thread that you says, okay, I got to go with this again. I got to tell you the same. I just told John and Mary, so I got to tell Sue now.
Right.
Is there an underlying thread?
Yeah, there is, Leroy. I think that the underlying thread has to do with hope and possibility. So I'm being invited around the country to speak to different groups of people because there are people who are searching. There are denominations that are searching. There are organizations that are searching because they know that the way things are in the United States now is not promising for our future. That somehow we have to determine how to bring down barriers and walls and to begin to build bridges and to focus on building friendships. And so when they find out what we're doing in Evanston with Evanston reparations, when they find out what we're doing at Second Baptist in Evanston with solidarity circles on race talks and reaching into various other faith communities and really building partnerships and friendships to bring down racism, to eliminate racism, everybody wants to know how did that begin? And how is that working out? And is there a sort of key ingredient? Is there a formula? So everybody has this hope. And my presence there is to say, yeah, this is what we're doing. And I believe that I can offer you hope because we think that it's beginning to work in our community.
Explain, I want to say something about solidarity circles, so explain that. So that, because most of folks that's probably listening don't know what it is, and some of them are not in Evanston.
Right.
So explain what that is.
Okay, so Leroy, solidarity circles is a term that's been around for a few decades, and it is a means of communicating within a community where folks who are different can gather together in a small circle, usually between 10 and 12 people, to discuss some of the difficult issues of the day. And some of those issues could be crime and violence. Some of them could be politically related. Well, in Evanston, we decided that we would take the Solidarity Circle format and create race talk circles so that we can begin to talk about racism in Evanston, not just the Black community talking about it over here, or the Latin community, community talking about it over here, or the white community talking about it over here. Let's get together in one circle and talk about race. How have you been influenced by it? How has it negatively affected you? And when we do that in a small circle with trained facilitators, for the first time, sometimes people have an opportunity to talk about race with somebody of a different race.
Absolutely.
And that begins to create an avenue for communication. And if you have an avenue for communication, you can begin to break down some of the stereotypes and preconceptions that you have of this race or that race, and begin to see people as human beings with more in common than we have differences.
You know what happened last week? You were saying someone from the Solidarity Circle, and that was my circle.
Oh,
that was my circle.
Oh my goodness.
Who actually came in, who had the speech.
Yeah.
Right.
Yes.
Now,
yes.
but what I want to say is that as I have become a part of that Solidarity Circle, let me tell you my experience.
Okay.
Because this is
Sure.
because I really want to. I don't want to try and give you a feedback on camera, but I'm going to give you a feedback. It seems like we as Black people have a lot more to say, you know, than or Caucasian counterpart.
Right.
Or Caucasian counterpart, they listen,
Mm-hmm.
but there's not the feedback. You can't get that because for some they have not been in that situation.
Mm-hmm.
So
Mm-hmm.
I was telling one of our other members. I said, I think it's good that we together talk about what's going on. But as Dr. King said, the most racist part is 11 a.m. Sunday morning, right?
Mhm.
So my thoughts were, this is good. I like the fact, and some people got emotional. Well, this is my thoughts to you. What if we can kind of connect those folks on Sunday morning?
Mm-hmm.
I think you get to know people when you really be with them,
Mm-hmm.
not just okay, we're gonna get this solid, you know, we're here and then we're gone and then you go to your space and I go to my space.
Right.
So my thoughts were, if we could worship more together, it breaks it down faster.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. So, well, Leroy, you may remember before COVID, pre-COVID, Second Baptist was engaged in what we call pulpit exchanges with other churches, particularly Lake Street
Lake
Church.
Street,
We were
yeah.
almost doing it every single year there for a period of time. COVID kind of shut everything down, but that was an opportunity for Black and whites to worship here at our early worship service, and then we would go over to Lake Street and worship at their later worship service. That is, I think, what created an opportunity for us to grow closer. So as you know, that probably is the reason why they wrote a letter to us last year saying, we believe that you all are 50% owners of the building of Lake Street, going back to our history in 1882. It was because of that sort of relationship that had been built through the exchange of pulpits and some of the other work that we were doing. So unfortunately, Leroy, when COVID happened, we had to stop the in-person gathering, but we did not stop the Zoom gathering
we didn't.
and the live stream. So we continue to do that, and hopefully at some point we'll be comfortable enough to go back into in-person worship and other churches and other churches coming to visit us.
So I know we don't have a lot of time, but what's happening with reparation? Explain to, I mean, I know the NAACP is pretty integral in working with the Evanston council with reparation.
Mhm.
Why don't we talk about that? You can tell me what, I mean, it's a kind of a loaded question. What's happening with that?
Okay. Okay. Well, there's a lot happening with it.
Yeah.
So I'm excited to say that Evanston Reparations is the first municipal reparations program in the United States of America for Black people. It was passed by City Council in Evanston in November of 2019. So when we fast forward to 2023, a lot of folks that appear to be disappointed with reparations believes that it isn't going fast enough, and they also believe that what we've done so far for them is not reparations. So when we did the homework, and that was done through amazing historians, we recognized one of the first things that we were able to describe as being egregious when it comes to racism historically was housing. We were able to discover the discrimination that occurred in housing, because of redlining, because of practices of white real estate companies not wanting to sell homes to Blacks in certain areas. All of that was evident. So the first piece of the reparation funding went to housing because that's where we were able to discover the greatest amount of racism occurring in a certain era. Now, what has happened recently is because of the fact that we don't have as many marijuana dispensaries as was originally projected, then they're not getting as much money from the city as they thought that they would when they passed the resolution in 2019. So that was a $10 million effort over a 10-year period. So far, there's only one dispensary in Evanston, and they thought that they were going to be able to have 3. So the folks who are disappointed are saying, well, the money's not coming. What's happening? What's happening? There's a reason why the money isn't coming, number one. But number two, we need to recognize it's the first step in a 1,000-mile journey. And so there are 16 families that receive $25,000 for their particular homes. And then the other side of that, Leroy, is a nonprofit organization that was developed called Reparations Stakeholders Authority of Evanston. There were a group of us working on the Evanston reparations that knew that was not going to be enough money to try to really funnel into the black community and into black families. So we started a nonprofit out of the effort of Evanston Community Foundation serving as a financial manager for us. We got together a board. We're very, very excited. Money started coming in, and the board decided that we would not begin to expend that money until it got to $1 million. So after about 1.5 years, we were sort of settled on about $400,000. And then I have to share this. I know we have to end, but this is a great feel-good story. The interfaith community in Evanston decided in July of last year that they would support the Reparations Stakeholders Authority of Evanston. They would raise dollars to try to contribute to the work. And so they started in July, and in January of this year, just less than a month ago, they presented that at our Interfaith Martin Luther King Jr. service. 18 houses of worship raised $842,000 for that nonprofit organization, which flipped us over the $1 million mark. So we're now excited about working with our board on how are we going to take initiatives and give that money out to black folks in the Evanston community who have been harmed because of racism, damaged because of racism. That's what reparations is all about. It seeks to repair the damage done because of racism that occurred in the past and present.
Now, when it comes to housing, you said there's 16 families. Is there a number, or is there a survey of the amount of people that the NAACP thinks that they would like to affect? Is there like 2,000 people in Evanston? I mean, and where's that going? Where do we think it's going?
Yeah, Leroy, I would say that I don't think that we have a survey, and I don't think that we have data that has been collected demographically, but I would say that for the NAACP, we think that every single black family that is in Evanston now should be able to remain in Evanston. They should not be forced out because they're no longer able to afford to pay a mortgage or can afford to pay rent. And we also think that something has to happen in the Evanston community to attract more blacks to come in and to live in the community. So I'm not going to say there's a number, but I would say if there are 13,000 black people that live in Evanston right now, we want those 13,000 black people to be living here a year from now and 10 years from now as well.
Okay.
Yes.
I know, we got a couple minutes left. So we're just gonna end on a fun note.
Okay.
We're gonna end on a fun note, right? So for those who have listened to this, you got to share this video, like us, and as we always say, if you want to hear something, and this is one of the things that people wanted to ask us to talk about black histories, and so we've brought that to you. As we send this out, let us know exactly what else you need. So we're gonna end on a fun note.
Okay.
Greatest album from Detroit.
Yeah.
Your greatest album.
Yeah. The greatest album that came out of Detroit?
That came out of Detroit.
I would say the greatest album.
Because I know you love music.
I love music.
I know you love music.
I do. I mean, you're asking a hard question, but I would say, and I have to focus on my favorite artist. Mm-hmm. I would say the greatest album that came out of Detroit was Marvin Gaye's "What's Going On."
That's good.
1970.
I was going to say. Yeah. That's exactly what I was thinking. But all right, but you said. But I just wanted to end it. I know. Again, we've been with Dr. Nabors. This is our first episode of season 5. So we want you to share it, like it, subscribe to it. And hey guys, until the next show, you can go to millsreal.com if you want to talk to us, millsreal.com. Thank you guys for listening. Again, thanks, Dr. Nabors.
Thank you.
Thank you for.
Yes.
We'll talk to you soon. Until the next show.